Thank you, Simon. Beautiful. Oh, and so here we are together on the eve of the winter solstice, which is always one of my favorite sacred nights of the year normally. And this year, it's going to be especially profound and important in terms of what it marks and symbolizes. Of course, the solstice is the longest night of the year. It's the night spiritually of the midnight sun, S-U-N. And for Christians, it is the night of the midnight sun, S-O-N. The divine made manifest in the personhood of the child that we call Jesus. It is in the night that we can see the stars and the moon and the planets in the sky. During the day, with all the beautiful radiant sunlight, it's hard to see them. One of my favorite things is always when during the daylight you can see the image of the moon, because it's just this reminder that it's ever there. Just as at night, the sun remains. It doesn't go away. It's just what you are perceiving and seeing at that point. I've always loved the quote that comes from Sarah Williams. I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night. And one of the things that night brings is this awareness. The world quiets. I know for me and for many of you, there are times where at 2 and 3 in the morning, either monkey mind can get going and you wake up with your fears, or something else happens, which is spirit awakens you and calls you to prayer. That happens to me a lot. Sometimes I know exactly who I'm praying for. Sometimes it's a global sense. Sometimes it is specific, but I don't get the name and it doesn't matter. It's about being a starlight in the night that someone is experiencing. And so night and day are both part of the cycles of life. And we resist sometimes one and not the other. Coming from Texas, I tend to resist the bright sun more. But it's recognizing that it's all part of this divine flow. And my favorite times of day are actually the betwixt and between times of dawn and evening as one shifts into the other. And so the winter solstice is an ancient tradition from the earth traditions. In fact, our Christian traditions, even of Christmas Eve, were overlaid onto those ancient earth traditions because it all connects, it all weaves together. And so the winter solstice and Christmas Eve always abide in very close proximity, 3 days, sacred number 3 between them. This year, however, something more unusual is going on. There is a great conjunction taking place with Jupiter and Saturn, and they're actually going to meet and conjoin where you'll actually be able to see it in the night sky. I'd recommend wherever you live, go online and see which direction to look so you can see it, because the 2 planets will join as one great light. And it will take place on the evening of the solstice. It turns out that every 600-700 years, the 2, Jupiter and Saturn, conjunct in Aquarius, which is where it's happening this year. But it's fairly rare. The last time that happened in Aquarius, which is the sign of new possibilities, new consciousness, new evolving humanity, was in 1405. Which was part of the Renaissance period. So it's been a while, and it has been 5,000 years since that Saturn and Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius takes place on the winter solstice. So you have Saturn, the great teacher, with Jupiter, the great expander, coming together, where you're constricted in some ways and expanding in others, where you're being taught lessons and at the same time receiving gifts. and they're blending together. And so we're feeling that dichotomy, that difference. But what we're called to become aware of right now is how they're both part of the process of evolution and change and evolving consciousness for us individually as well as collectively. If you look back on your own lives, it's through the times of challenge that the greatest lessons are learned and the greatest gifts are given. The new insight comes. We get those ahas, and we're called out of norms into new possibilities. David Pam talks about this as the beginning of a 20-year cycle of social and cultural change and birth, that we are in labor right now. I was going, oh, please, when we hit the solstice, does that mean everything's going to lighten up and it's going to be easier? We are at the portal where that process begins. The light this year of the solstice is not just for this year. It is lighting the way of an entire new wave of consciousness. The next 20 years will be the beginning elements of that great wave. He said, we're giving birth, but we're still in labor. And it's all about developing equality and peace. Stephanie Austin, who's here in town and who we all love dearly, had a wonderful article that I'd encourage you to read about how conjunctions begin and end cycles, and that this one is rare. And it's been 5,000 years since it happened on the solstice. And she says this solstice conjunction marks a major turning point in humanity's evolutionary journey, a growing readiness to embrace the Aquarian ideals of equality, collaboration, and progressive change. Aren't we all ready for that? We've been preparing, and now this portal is here for us to unite and move through. Akuyata Bhavadasa in the ARE, the Research and Enlightenment Edgar Cayce magazine, talks about great conjunctions are also big turning points in civilization. This is global. These are outer planets that move very slowly and cause global shifts as well as big shifts in us individually. It's calling for dynamic and powerful changes in the world. And he says in many ways, it brings hope and the curse of progress. The hope being knowing that we can develop something more kind and compassionate, but the curse of sometimes being ahead of the curve and having to hold the light with patience and kindness while others come to the place of justice and equality. And he said it's a time of growth amid extremes. Haven't we all seen that? He said it's slow, it's hard, but it is happening. And it is about us being willing to hold this light in new ways and to believe these high callings, these new possibilities. He says the key for this solstice is to come together with others, to set aside selfish interests, set aside self-righteousness, I'm right, they're wrong, and to be willing to work collaboratively toward a greater good. I find myself remembering Nelson Mandela's wonderful quote, "May your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears." There have been a lot of fears floating around with everything that's happening in the world, locally, in our own lives, and fears can take over. And this solstice, this conjunction reminds us that it's the time to recognize that we have been challenged and honor honor the soul journey of dealing with fear, but use the light of this solstice to rekindle the light of hope at the core of your being. And let your choices reflect your hope and your belief in the presence of the divine in our world, rather than having your fears lead the way. It's the greatest gift you can give, is to be willing to hold the light, to be the light. So how do we go about doing that? Well, this day, our key word is joy. Teilhard de Chardin said the clearest sign of the presence of God is joy. Joy is an inner recognition that all is well and all shall be well, that we're never walking alone, that the presence of the divine is ever with us, that even in the midst of darkness, there are lights in the sky, and that we have those lights within us as well. And we're called to share those with the world. And so the two groups of characters that we're looking at today are perfect for this solstice time. We have the shepherds and we have the Magi. And they each represent parts of who we are. And how do we step through this portal, not only spiritually with hope, but embodied as we confront fears and as we confront change and as we confront our own biases and try and be a little more tender and kind with ourselves and with one another. And so the shepherds and the Magi represent two parts of who we are, both of which are called to the nativity, who are called to this coming of the Christ light anew in the world, to celebrate its presence that never goes away, but that we need to remember. And I think this is a perfect time in our lives, in our country, in our world, to renew and restore and relight that as we gather during this Advent season and on Thursday night for Christmas Eve. And so the shepherds are the first ones. You find the shepherds in the Gospel of Luke, which is the gospel that is the one that speaks most to all people. It's inclusive. It includes the outcasts and includes women. It includes the educated, the uneducated, the Jewish, the Gentile. Luke was the most inclusive gospel. And he has the story of the shepherds, how they're abiding on the hill, and then the angel appears and tells them, be not afraid. Because if a giant angel appeared on the hillside of our lives, I think be not afraid is a real good place to start. And so these shepherds represent us going about our daily, ordinary, everyday lives. The shepherds represent us caring for one another in the ways every day, serving meals, being present for one another, doing the little things that help take care of one another, praying for one another, being willing to grow spiritually, to be present. It's not by accident that Jesus is referred to as the shepherd. He's also referred to as the Lamb of God, the tender, gentle lamb, but also the shepherd who provides and cares for and protects the lamb. The shepherds are found not down in the valley, but on a hillside. They're not up at the top of the mountain. They're not in the valley. They're on a hillside, which metaphysically means they are not down in just everyday consciousness, and they're not high up in spiritual consciousness. They're in that neat place where the two meet, where the two become one. And so they have a little bit higher vision, but still in the midst of their everyday lives. Spirit meeting them right where they are, sending an angel to awaken them and say, come, follow me. And they're willing to do it. And so the mantra for the shepherd in you, for the part of you that is in everyday life, but always seeking to lift up to that hillside where you perceive spiritually what's going on as well and bring them together in, through, and as you. Your divinity, your humanity, meeting as one on the hillside. And then let yourself be met there by the presence of the divine and called into whatever your next unfolding is. The mantra for the shepherds, as you move through this portal of the solstice into the coming year, be not afraid. Powerful mantra. Be not afraid. And the quote comes from A Course in Miracles. If you knew who walked beside you on the path that you have chosen, fear would be impossible. So on this solstice, accept the gift of the shepherds and the shepherd within you, and be not afraid. The other group that appears at the Nativity come from afar. They come from the east, and they're the Magi. And it's interesting because they're found in the Gospel of Matthew, which is the most Jewish of all of the Gospels. It's constantly referring back to the foretelling that was found in the Old Testament, and using that to show how Jesus is the one who has been foretold. And so in this most Jewish of all the Gospels, you find the Magi, the Zoroastrian astrologers who have come from afar. This shows once again the universality of the heart and soul of the message of the Christian tradition. Powerful, powerful. The Magi, the star watchers. For in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we are told to watch the night sky for portents and signs, for guidance. It's not evil to look at the night sky. It's part of a recognition of the divine order of all of life. And so we celebrate these Magi who were the scholars, the wise ones, the royal ones that come from afar. They represent that part of us that is ever seeking to grow in spiritual understanding. They were students of the universe. They were students of the unfolding, not only universally, but personally, of the path of spirit. And they trusted it so much that when the night star appeared, the great star appeared, that may, by the way, have been a grand conjunction, they followed it. And they followed it afar. And they came and were part of this. And they represent for us that part of us that's willing to study and to notice signs, to grow spiritually. That's why people in Unity read and go to workshops all the time. They're Magi, they're seekers. And then to be willing to follow it and do it, to step into the journey and do what you've been sent to do and bring the gifts that are yours. The tradition of the Magi in more detail didn't evolve until between the 2nd and the 5th century. And there were not necessarily just 3, but that was what evolved as tradition. Gaspar, Melchior, and Balthazar are the names that they were given, not in scripture, but by church tradition. And they come from the East, which is the arising light of new dawn. And they come with gold, which represents gifts of wealth and wisdom. They come with frankincense, a gift that recognizes holiness and transformation. And they come with myrrh, which represents the process of resurrection, eternality, and the power of love. Symbolic gifts, the gifts that we have to bring to the world, our very own time, talent, treasure, and touch are the gifts that we as Magi can bring to the world. And so as we step together through this winter solstice portal of unfolding, the mantra for the Magi is simply bring your gifts. Bring your gifts. Every one of us has unique things to contribute to the unfolding of the world. Every single one. Bring your gifts, however large or small they seem to you to be, for every gift is a treasure. I love the quote when I think of the Magi that comes from George Eliot. It is never too late to be what you might have been. It's never too late to follow the star. It's never too late to step out of your comfort zone into new possibilities. It's never too late to learn, and it's never too late to share the gifts that you are and that you bring. Stephanie Austin says this: we are in the midst of an evolutionary shift, moving from materialism, polarization, and domination into the paradigm of the heart, where we realize our interconnectedness, equality, and divinity. We are metamorphosing into a new species described in Mayan, Hopi, and other ancient prophecies, as well as by modern visionaries. I was blessed when I was in ministerial school to go, just before I graduated, out to California to Barbara Marx Hubbard gathering for the universal human. And she said, we are moving from Homo sapiens into Homo universalis, the universal human. The boundaries of time and space and matter are dropping away. Homo universalis. David R. Hawkins uses the term Homo spiritus. Homo spiritus. And the shaman Alberto Villoldo and Leslie Temple Thurston used the term Homo luminous. I love that one. I've been using Homo universalis for a while. But as we stand on this portal of this most holy winter solstice, in our collective unfolding into hope and new possibilities, I see us not only as Homo universalis, seeing ourselves in one with the universe, but also Homo spiritus. We are where spirit and matter meet, divine humanity. But most of all, on this solstice, let us be willing to be the living embodiment of Homo luminous. Let us be light bearers. Let us see the lights even when it's dark. And let us be messengers and light bearers in this new unfolding time of kindness and compassion, inclusivity and love, and a greater wisdom that will guide us past divisions into a place of unity. I am so thrilled that we are abiding and living in a time where we get to be part of this transformational process. You are not here by accident. Your soul chose to be present here and now. So be not afraid. Bring your gifts. We all need each one of us. Blessings with the light of joy, with the gifts of the shepherds and the Magi, beloved homoluminous companions.